For latest updates and short audio clips, follow us on Instagram, Reading the Author.
Hey guys, welcome back to the podcast Reading the Author, a unique show where we read authors' mind and not their book. Meanwhile, I truly believe and pray that you and your families are completely safe and healthy as well. Guys, today we have Rajesh Talwar sir with us, and he is the author of altogether 37 books. So it's truly an honor to share this platform with you, sir. Thank you so much for coming on our show.
Thank you, Gaurav. It's my pleasure. It's very good to be with you and using this new technology which more people listen to.
Pleasure, sir. So, sir, before we get into the podcast and know much more about your books, about your vision and everything, I would request you to please share your journey so that our listeners can know much more about you. And do let us know how you started this writing journey by the way.
Okay, well, that's I started practicing law and many years ago. And when I was practicing law, I found there were many things wrong with the Indian legal system. And so I was writing about those things in the newspapers at the time, Economic Times, Pioneer, Patriot, EPW, some other magazines. And then soon I had a collection. And then by chance I met a publisher, one of the big publishers at that time, Orient Paperbacks. He suggested, why don't you write something for us? Write a book instead. At the time, I thought within the self-help category, making your own will could be a good idea. So I said, okay. So I wrote a book on how a person can make his own will, making your own will, and it became a bestseller. The publishers were very pleased because in those years, if you sold more than 10,000 copies, it was a bestseller. And then that sort of triggered off my journey. The next book was published by a small publisher in Daryaganj, not someone as big as Orient Paperbacks. But I sent a copy to many newspapers and editors, and there was a response from only one person, that was Mr. Kushwant Singh. Kushwant Singh wrote back saying that I'm having a cataract operation. I may not be able to review it. But then he added in his postcard, I came home and my father told me there's a postcard from Kushwant Singh. So he added in his postcard, I have read a few pages, I will review it.
Wow.
And then, yes, that was just fabulous. So I thought, okay, let's see what happens. Because the newspapers and magazines, they are inclined to review only the big publishers. But Kushwant Singh was such a name. Anyhow, I didn't know what he was going to do. And 2 or 3 weeks later, he had a column called With Malice Towards One and All. It was a very famous column. It used to come every week in the Hindustan Times, and it was syndicated to almost 200 newspapers. So he opened his piece with that I've just read this book by Rajesh Talwar, who practices law and he teaches law. And he said it reminded me of my own days in Lahore when I was a young lawyer. And I can identify completely with the terrible injustices he finds in the court. So it went on and on. And at that time, I was a young lawyer, but I had Supreme Court judges calling me after Kushwant Singh's review that can we have a copy of that book? So you could say that was 2 times lucky. First time I was lucky with Vision Books because the book itself was a bestseller. And the second time I was lucky that Mr. Kushwant Singh was kind enough to review this book. In fact, the publisher said they had never received so many letters from all over the country, even from Nepal and from Bangladesh, that we have also had very bad experience with the courts. So that with these 2 books, I applied for a British Chevening scholarship. And after a few years of practice, and in the interview, the British ambassador who was doing the interview, there were, of course, so many people who applied, and many of them were much more successful lawyers as compared to myself. He saw those books and he said, you tell us where you want to go. You want to go to Nottingham or to Essex? And there was a third place in London. So I preferred Nottingham. So I went to the University of Nottingham on a scholarship, and then a couple of years after that, I joined the United Nations. And then, of course, I was always interested in literature, so I started writing fiction, novels, short stories. This is the first short story collection, actually, which is published in book form. Other self-help books on social issues, legal issues. And that's how my journey began.
So that's truly an inspiring journey. And, so my next question would be like, after reading, like after listening to this particular podcast, many people will love to explore your book, like, the latest one which you are talking about. So exactly, like, can you share some insights for those people who are just very new to, your books, like what they can expect from this book, Trading Flesh in Tokyo?
Okay, well, just to close off the last discussion on how I started off as a lawyer, I'd like to, and since you mentioned that people may be listening, I'd like to mention also that, money is not everything, because my first two books didn't get me much money, but they got me a scholarship which was worth about £20,000. So keep writing, those who are struggling, and you may find some benefits. Now, coming to this present book, I have been with the UN for 2 decades, and I've been working in Africa, African countries, Somalia, Liberia, Kenya, as well as in Europe, in Kosovo, as well as Asia, in Afghanistan, East Timor. So I've had an opportunity to visit many countries, and I think also the people are traveling more these days. So I thought, let me write a short story collection which has got a multi-national characters in the cast, and also has locations in many different countries which I have visited. So what makes this short story collection different is that you have a narrator who is an Indian, you have a narrator who is British, you have Nepali characters, you have a Japanese characters, you even have a Chinese billionaire telling his story. So it talks about the universality of human experience, I guess, at one level. So I think what the reader will get is something different, that he will get, firstly, the short story itself. Secondly, he'll get an authentic overseas location where the short story is based. For example, Trading Flesh in Tokyo is based in Tokyo. But then another story is based in Thailand. And the third thing is that he will also see characters from different nationalities. So I suppose I have brought in my long experience with the UN, where I have interacted with so many nationalities, and also I've had the occasion to travel to so many countries. So that's something that makes this short story collection a bit special for me.
So, sir, like, we just talked about the people who will be very new to, your books. But talking about the people who have already read your books, like, you have already written 37 books, right? And we can see that there's no way you're going to stop as of now. So, is there anything in the pipeline you want to explore other genres, or you want to experiment in some other fields? Like, is there anything upcoming as of now?
Yes. I have several books in the pipeline. And although, I had written 37 books, it's interesting that this is my first short story collection. So I had written many novels, children's books, plays, non-fiction, but I had not written out a collection of short stories. So this is a first for me. Similarly, although I have traveled so widely, I have not yet written a travelogue. So the next book in the pipeline is a travelogue.
Okay.
It will focus on my travels to 8 Asian nations. And I think the working title is Where the Elephants Danced and the Dragons Flew. So it's going to talk about how, elephant representing India, how India influenced these nations, and also the dragon influenced them, which is China. So that's the next book. But I also want to try my hand at a graphic novel, which I will do in collaboration with an artist, which is also something I have not done before.
Okay.
And then finally, I'm thinking I may do a serious novel on the partition of the country. So there has been, of course, a lot of attention this year because it was the anniversary of the, partition, the horrific events. And but maybe in a year or so, I might want to do a book on the partition. And there are other books as well. There's a non-fiction book on Afghanistan that I want to take out, which will speak of my time spent there, because I spent quite a few years in Afghanistan. And I'd like to talk about this experiment, which was unfortunately not successful, and the reasons why it was not successful, why the international community withdrew from Afghanistan. So that's also a book in the pipeline.
So definitely there's a lot of, So there's definitely lots of different kinds of books which are coming on the way of the readers who are, just eagerly waiting to read your books, right?
Thank you.
So, sir, my next question to this podcast is I have been in conversation with around, more than 180, 190 plus authors as of now. Most of them are trying to build a certain kind of image, a certain kind of, genre, or a certain kind of, they want to give a feel to their readers. Okay, if this is my book, my reader will be getting these kinds of vibes from my book. So when it comes to you personally, you have written more than 37 books you have written all together as of now. And lots of them are coming in near future too. So let's say if anybody has read all your books and after a couple of years they see, okay, it's a new book by Rajesh. So what instant impact you want to create on that reader mind? क्योंकि ठीक है राजेश सर की बुक है तो ऐसी होगी, या फिर मुझे ये चीजें इस बुक से मिलेंगी, ऐसा फील हो? Have you thought about them?
Yes, well, I could say, the feeling I would like to for a reader to come is कि this is Rajesh Talwar's book. पता नहीं क्या किताब किस पे लिखा होगा, because so I'd like not to be predictable and not to be typecast. For example, I think writers, Amitabh Bachchan in an interview few months ago, he said every writer is also an actor. Because he said when he's writing out characters, then he is actually, the characters are there in his mind and he's acting them out. So, but actors also don't like to be typecast. And it's a tragedy if an actor gets typecast that, okay, you're only this type of a stylish hero, or you're only this kind of a villain. I think for so many years, the legendary villain Pran, he was trying to get out of villain roles and then finally got a break with Manoj Kumar's film Purab aur Paschim. So when a writer gets typecast that this is a crime fiction writer, this is a writer who only writes about romance, a romance novelist, or this is a playwright, that I think limits a writer, and I personally would feel disappointed in myself. But why this happens is because of market forces. When a person is successful in a particular genre, then his publisher says, just keep writing on this. In the same way, the film industry, they typecast. So for me, I would like my readers to feel, we don't know Rajesh Talwar's next book. Is it going to be crime fiction? Will it be children's story? Will it be non-fiction? So, for example, this is my first collection of short stories, and the next one will be my first travelogue. But I also hope, because as a writer I like to stretch myself, I also hope to pen a spiritual book in a year or so from now. So that will be a first for me. So I suppose there's resistance in me to the idea that I would be typecast. I would like to think that I want to try new genres. And for example, graphic novels is more a thing of younger generation, but I'm attracted to it. I sometimes read graphic novels. I enjoy the Wimpy Kid very much. And I thought, why can't India have its own Wimpy Kid, because Indian kids are more wimpy than American kids, because they are bookish, they're not so outgoing. So the original Wimpy Kid was probably an Indian, but we haven't created such a character. We haven't written something which has gone global, and I think it would be so nice. And these things are waiting to happen, because as India is gaining clout on the international stage, soon our writers also. As a child, for example, I read Enid Blyton, and I was wondering, what are muffins, what are scones, blueberry scones. But foreigners can also read about Indian stories and wonder, what is this samosa, what is this chole bhature. We just have to, start writing in such a way that the world comes to us and they start picking up our books and they say, oh, let's read him. This is so interesting.
So, sir, my next question to this podcast is what I personally feel that after the first lockdown was over, I basically asked this question to most of the authors, and I truly want to ask it to you as well. After the first lockdown was over, the numbers of authors got increased very rapidly. I have been into this industry for more than 7 years as of now, and I have personally seen this boom after the first lockdown was over. So when it comes to you, what exactly do you think, how difficult it has become as of now to make your book stand out in today's market? आजकल के market में stand out कराना बहुत difficult हो गया है, या फिर you are one of those people who thinks कि every author will find their particular audience, every book will find their own readers? What's your take on this?
Well, I think firstly, of course, the publishing world has changed, and so traditional publishers have become more cautious. Because there are more authors there, it's more difficult to sell. They hesitate to make the investments. And now it's very much a social media age. So I have met many brilliant speakers who cannot write to save their lives. And I have also met many wonderful authors who can write beautifully, but they cannot speak. So for example, say this person Anand Raghunathan, or I may not agree with his politics, but he speaks in a very articulate fashion. But his books are terrible; they are unreadable. Or take Anuj Dhar. He's written a book on Subhash Chandra Bose, and well, but his book is actually quite unreadable, even if it's done very well. The same is true in the reverse also. There are authors who write beautifully, but if you get them on a podcast, they will freeze. Some of them may be just introverted. Some of them just are not, they are camera shy. So, but now in this social media, the way it has come up, you need an author. An author needs to be a writer as well as a bit of a performer. He needs to stick his neck out. So it's for this reason that even people like Salman Rushdie, they are tweeting regularly. Shashi Tharoor is tweeting regularly, because social media has, in a way, taken control of our lives. I'm not saying, I would say to an extent it's unhealthy. And I personally make sure that I take a break from my phone or the computer regularly, because it's not healthy to be all the time on social media. It's neither psychologically healthy nor physically healthy.
True.
But this is another thing is that you have to move with the times. There's a friend of mine who wrote a very good book on the freedom movement, and I said, but my dear, why isn't your book available on Kindle? And she said, no, I don't want it to be available on Kindle. I said, I forbade my publishers. I said, why would you do that? Who is going to buy your book in Australia? The shipping cost you have to consider if you want to make your... So she said, no. So if you think like that, you will become a dinosaur. Because you have to move with the times. So I think the times have changed, and now this new idea of a brand has come up, that you have to
build your personal brand as well.
You have to build your personal brand, and actors, performers, singers, and writers, they are, I think to an extent it's good if an author resists this and is not swallowed too much by it, but at the same time you can't ignore it. And it also depends on you. If you're comfortable with the camera, if you're comfortable with podcasts, then you should just go ahead.
That's okay. So sir, as of now, do you have any particular writing schedule, like you devote some particular hours daily to your writing, or it's like random कि कभी कोई thought आया तो phone में या डायरी में लिख लिया, फिर बाद में बैठ के लिखते हैं? How does it go with you?
Well, if I with the UN, my routine was that I could work on non-fiction together with doing my office work. So if I have like a 9 to 5, or actually 8 to 6, you're there in the office working on contracts, commercial aspects, other things with your job in the UN involves you to do. Then in the morning before work or after work, you can work on a non-fiction book of any kind. But you can't do that with fiction, because fiction you have to actually immerse yourself into a different world, and then you can't come out and suddenly start living a very practical life. So I think I used to reserve my fiction writing for the weekends. And fiction writing also is, since it's more immersive, you don't want people to disturb you. So that is difficult during the weekday, because your boss will want to speak to you, your colleague will want to speak to you, your subordinate will want to speak to you. So with non-fiction, it doesn't matter so much, because even if there is a distraction, you can get back to it. But with fiction, it breaks the rhythm. But these days, I have a consultancy with the UN, which is not so taxing. So I can plan better and I can write more fiction.
So, sir, as of now, like we have talked about your book, about your upcoming books, about your journey and everything. Now coming to something, which will be very close to you, like, something what exactly you have felt in the past. So now let's get back to the time when you heard that, okay, your first book will be released tomorrow, right? So on that particular eve, what was going on in your mind? Like, were you feeling relaxed, excited, or you have just, marked up some milestones? Okay, these many people know me, my book has to be sold out, these many copies. It is, being published from a traditional publisher, so it has to be something grand has to be done. Or what was going on in your mind at that time, sir?
Well, what was going on was the publisher's wife called and she said, Rajesh, the book is doing very well. And in fact, we have a law publisher who might take out a pirated copy, because they are tracking which books are doing well in the market. So that made me very happy. But what made me really happy at that time was when I was walking in Connaught Place and I found that the pavement sellers, they had one of my books displayed. Because that's the kind of satisfaction that they have lots of books to choose from, but the pavement people, So if they display your book, that's progress. And then I found the book also at railway stations, and I found it at airports. So a friend called me, oh, I'm at such and such airport, I just saw your book. So then you are walking on air. It's a great, great, great feeling. But as I mentioned, there are many aspects to this satisfaction. For example, the non-fiction book which I had written, which was critical of the Indian legal system, that came out in hardback. And in terms of sales, it may not have done so well despite Mr. Kushwant Singh's review. It may have done well, but it was not in a paperback format to, do so well. However, I attributed my scholarship and my time in Nottingham directly to the publication of that book, because when I went for my interview for the Chevening Scholarship, there were 5 people sitting and they had this book in front of them, and that actually tilted everything in my favor. So I think you have many other benefits. And then of course I was overjoyed that perhaps I haven't made money, but no matter how much money I would have made, it would not have added up to the scholarship, because the scholarship was much more valuable. So but I had no this was not planned. So I think people, if you have something to say, you have to say it in whichever form, through newspaper writing, through book writing, and if you write, if you spend the energy, you will be rewarded. At the same time, I would say, don't give up your day job. Don't say that, oh, I'm not going to work, I'm just going to be a writer. There's a very famous editor who's edited lots of famous people. He said, I will never advise any author to give up his day job. Never become a full-time writer. Why? He said, because your job enriches you. Your job gives you life experiences. A writer's life is very boring. He's just, sitting in cafes, going to literary festivals, talking to editors. But if you are in a corporate life, if you are in a legal life, maybe you'll have a more interesting life, and those experiences you can put into your books. So I think I totally agree with it. For example, this collection of short stories, if I hadn't been to so many countries, if I hadn't met so many nationalities, I couldn't have written it. But I couldn't have done that without my job with the UN. So if I had thought, no, let me leave my job with the UN and let me become a full-time writer, that's just foolishness.
Okay. So, sir, my probably last question to this podcast is after listening to this podcast, many people will start writing, or they must be holding their first draft in their laptop, in their diary. So what would be your advice for those upcoming authors?
I would say that, keep your original voice. Don't try to copy anyone, because everybody looks for originality, whether it's in music, cinema, or in writing. You can be influenced by other people, but your voice should be original. And don't be disheartened if you're not successful. Have other things in life also. Don't be, like a bookworm or something, that you're just focused on your writing, There's more to life. There's a girlfriend, there's the parents, there are other male colleagues, and there's your writing, which is important. But don't have too many expectations from it in terms of financial rewards or other kind of reward. They will come, but it's good if you don't have the expectation.
So thank you so much, sir. And okay, so that's all for today, guys. I hope you must have enjoyed this inspiring and lovely conversation with Rajesh, sir. If you do, then do let us know by following us on all the leading podcast platforms. You can just reading the author. You will get the link. Just follow us on all the leading podcast platforms. Don't forget to buy and read the book. आप just Amazon पे जाएं, वहाँ पे सर्च करें राजेश तलवार, सर की सारी बुक्स आ जाएंगी. जरूर खरीदें, पढ़ें और अपने जानने वाले चैनल से जरूर शेयर करें. Thank you so much, sir, for coming on our show. It was my honor to be able to host you today.
Thank you so much, Gaurav, and all good luck to you and your outfit. And you're doing a very good job promoting Indian literature. It was great talking to you. Thank you very much.
Pleasure, sir. Thank you so much, sir.
Thank you.